Good morning. It is time for the Mike Hewitt Show, brought to you by RenegadeRiver.com. And as we were getting into the show, Mike, you mentioned that we're just going to do some babbling today. Did you say?
Oh, yes, we do some babbling.
Babbling.
Babbling, absolutely.
So it's time to start the process of babulation.
It is a babulation. Listen, normally, folks, we do, the format of the show has been to do some interviews. And if you were listening last week, you know we deviated a little bit from that path for the Christmas show, and today is no different. We're still a little bit off path. What I wanted to do today, I think a lot of people are doing this, so it's not terribly shocking, but I wanted to look at 2015 kind of in retrospect and look at some of the news, and I know a lot of folks are doing that, but I probably may have a slightly different perspective. So I wanted to do that. I also am going to offer some predictions for 2016, 2 or 3 little predictions. And then, of course, at the final segment today, we're going to do an Enigma report, the return of the Enigma report, because we skipped it last week.
So we have to end the year on the right foot, right?
We have to.
Oh, you bet.
Yeah, you can't. Yeah, absolutely. It's like when you're skipping, you can't just stop midstream. You got to finish it.
That's right.
We're skipping. So anyhow, when I looked back at 2015, I made some notes. Some of the things locally, and also some of the things on a national level. Of course, everyone that's listened to the show knows that I took the Dewey Hill cross removal, and then subsequently the dialogue about whether the nativity scene on Dewey Hill and Grand Haven being shuttled off possibly to the museum. I took that kind of personal, but that's how 2015 began, with the war over the cross on Dewey Hill. And in fact, it was probably one of the busiest shows we've had. Certainly the phones out on the main area, this phone was going crazy. A lot of people shared that angst with me. So that was the first thing. Jimmy, you've got anything on your list of stunning things for 2015?
You know, I don't. Other than we have this, of course, this, I think, quite unusual election coming up. So that, I think, short of the unexpected, which is guaranteed to hit, certainly events like 9/11 and terrorism are unexpected events.
Some of the things, when you talk about the election coming forward, are on my list. For instance, when we started this year, Jeb Bush was going to be the nominee. He was the obvious front runner, and everyone was going, "Oh, brother, another Clinton-Bush campaign. That'll be really refreshing with bold and fresh
And that
ideas."
was all the experts, you bet. Bush was it.
All
Absolutely.
of the talking heads across the spectrum, from NBC all the way to Fox News and everything in between, everyone, that was going to be the race. And of course, she's still, they really don't have a bench with viable candidates. And if they did, I mean, the closest that she's got to a rival is a devout, very, very open socialist. So he's appealing to just the extreme third, the far left of the Democratic Party, and it leaves Hillary out with the lion's share, the 60+%. And if you look at the Republican side, you know, it's one of those double-edged swords, because we started out with an absolute plethora of candidates, and we're starting to narrow them down. We saw Pataki has just recently fallen away, and I think I just saw this morning that somebody else has dropped out. So folks are starting to fall off of that list. But the great thing about having so many candidates is that it's brought a lot of new ideas to the arena, but none of them have been able to beat the guy that back when they were all saying that Jeb Bush was going to be the candidate. And by the way, I'm not a Trump supporter. Let me say it before I get this show going. Having said that, if he's our nominee, I will vote for him. That aside, the same folks that said Jeb is the man said that, well, first off, Trump won't actually run. Then they said, okay, he's going to run, tease you a little bit, then fracture the party and go to a third party. Then they said he'll explode, he'll self-destruct in the first debate. Well, okay, maybe the second debate. The third debate. Well, maybe the fifth debate he's going to self-destruct. And listen, I'm seeing polling that's got him around 40, but I think the reality of it is that his polling is up above 50%. That's what I'm seeing. What are you boys seeing?
I think it's funny that Trump was going to be the independent candidate, but actually all we hear now about being an independent is Webb from the Democratic side.
And listen, he's the only guy, in my view, he's far left of me, don't misunderstand me, but he's the only guy on the Democratic side that when I sit and listen to him, even though I don't necessarily agree with all his ideas, he's the closest to a JFK candidate that they've got. He's at least reasonable. He's a person that you could sit down and make deals with. He brings that side of the equation to the table, and they don't like that. They immediately broomed him and said, "Get." So
It's funny how that independent turned, though.
Yep.
Bush was the nominee. Trump's going to be the independent. He's going to split the Republican vote. Guarantee win for Clinton. And now we may see Trump's the nominee. Clinton's vote's going to be split by Webb.
But you know, the angst I've seen, or the dialogue I've seen in Facebook and Twitter and so forth, is that he's getting ready to announce. And a lot of the folks that have been watching very closely said, "Oh, stop it." He announced the day that he announced that he was withdrawing from the Democrat primary, that he immediately became a candidate on the independent side. I say if that's true, then he's in trouble, because the media is giving him almost no traction at all. It's almost non-existent if you just read the news.
They're giving him the coverage that he deserves. You can't run as an independent this late unless you are a billionaire. It costs millions of dollars just to get the signatures necessary to get on the ballot.
You don't think there's enough angst in the Democratic Party with Hillary?
I think the last time that anyone will hear the name Jim Webb throughout the next year will be on this radio show. You bet. We're not going to hear anything about him because he's not worth hearing about.
One of my other favorite things from 2015 from the Hillary campaign reminded me of The Wizard of Oz. Pay no attention to the computer server behind the toilet. That's got to be one of my favorite things. She had the server for the nation's secrets in a bathroom in Colorado. You're going, what? This is the Secretary of State, one of the highest offices in the land, with messages from all of the leaders all over the world, and it's in a bathroom in some little rinky-dink company in the state of Colorado.
Poof, they're gone. They don't exist anymore.
Well, the problem is, poof, that story is gone. That's what the Clintons have done so well. They certainly did it with the Monica Lewinsky issue. They allowed it to drag out and drag out and drag out to the point when you finally got the information, the real information. People were so bored with the story. That particular methodology of handling the crises will continue on forever. We now know, certainly, Richard Nixon would never, ever have been forced to resign the presidency had he destroyed those tapes. That is the future of American politics, at least for the next year till something new comes in. But no matter what our elected leaders do, as long as they can continue to fight and continue to extend the scandal, they will exist and they will escape with virtually everything. My golly, have you ever heard a single Republican, with the exception perhaps of Donald Trump, accuse President Obama of being a liar? The president who said, if you like your doctor, you can keep your doctor. If the Republicans will refuse to call someone who is so patently the biggest liar, I mean, believe it or not, Bill Clinton lied to the American public multiple times on television. All right, he became the greatest liar that we've ever seen as a president in the United States. Barack Obama blew him out of the stadium in terms of being someone who tells untruths pretty much on a regular basis. And yet, not one person I've ever heard in the Republican Party has ever called him a liar, with the exception of Donald Trump.
The most recent lie, we have ISIS contained.
Exactly. Or how about the one that they proudly put in, that their greatest achievement in foreign policy this year has been the peace that now exists in Syria. They just announced this a week ago Friday.
Yeah.
The guy did win the Nobel Peace Prize.
That's very important. He did that before he did his... Well, no, that's not true. In fact, the only time I know for a fact that he told the truth, and this sounds contrite, but it's true, the only time I know for a fact he told the truth was when he was interviewed following his speech that he gave to the Democratic National Committee, their convention, gave a great rousing speech, and they asked him within a day or so, have you considered running on a national ticket? He said, no. I think that a person ought to have enough experience to hold the job before they ask for it. And went on to say, I just won the Senate. I'd have to start campaigning right now to even have a chance. Well, 3 months later, we knew that he was actually a candidate. But in my view, by the way, is that somebody after that interview got to him and said, never give another one of those interviews like that. So whoever's handling him, and I do believe he's being handled, whoever's handling him has said, don't ever do that ever again.
Well, he's clearly the most powerful and has achieved the most of his particular agenda of any president in my lifetime.
I think he goes
and he's
back
done it with boldness. And I think there's the difference between the Republicans and Democrats. Democrats have been bold, be it at the state level,
right,
be it at the national level. If we're going to talk about things happening next year, it will be a bellwether for me. If Donald Trump does not get the Republican nomination, it will be a blow to honesty and openness and boldness. Now, Donald Trump's got plenty of issues, but the fact that if you talk to anyone who is a fan of Donald Trump, and to a lesser extent, I would say Ted Cruz, what they like about him isn't necessarily his particular stance on issues, although the immigration issue is, of course, his signature one, but it is he speaks to us in a manner that we understand, as opposed to the couched phrases that we hear endlessly from both parties.
There are people, obviously, on the Democratic side that absolutely passionately hate him, which I find fascinating because over the last many decades, most of his political contributions went to Democratic candidates and causes. So that's as a classical liberal-leaning conservative. When I look at that, I have tremendous distrust of him. Now, that aside, what I said earlier is that if he becomes the nominee, I will vote for him, even though I do not support him in the primary. I will support him. I think there's probably 200 million people in America that I would vote for instead of Hillary Clinton for President of the United States, and I mean that literally. I passionately dislike and distrust that lady. I find it fascinating that people can look at her and say, there's a president. I don't get that. That's not a gender statement, folks. It's a statement against her lack of morality. I honestly don't understand.
Well, let's get back to those predictions, because I think that
well, not to the prediction, Judge. Let's slow the ponies down. We still have some things we gotta understand that happened in 2015. Don't you know?
Well, let me tell you. Let me just touch a prediction that has much to do with what we did in 2015 and 14 and on back, and that is in the 7 years of President Obama's presidency, sadly, with the help of the Democrat Party and the Republican Party, he has more than doubled the national debt. Now, as bad as that is, we've gone from something in the neighborhood of $7 trillion of debt to almost $19 trillion in debt. There's still another year to go. But during that time, the debt of municipalities has gotten even worse. And, of course, the difference, and the reason this is important is that the United States, the federal government, can print money, which we've seen. That allowed it to more than double its debt in a relatively short period of time. But the state of Michigan can't do that. Muskegon County can't do that. Certainly none of the cities and townships can do that. And one of the predictions that I will make, which many people had predicted, of course, the collapse of Detroit and, of course, the tsunami of money to try to bail them out. But what is coming up next year, and we will, for the first time in the United States, really have to face this, is the collapse of Puerto Rico, which is a territory. It's a protectorate of the United States government. They are more than broke. They've announced, much like the city of Detroit, that no matter what, they do not have enough money to pay.
You're going to see a bailout.
Well, you're going to see a discussion. Now, the question is, will it be a bailout? I don't know. But the point is that maybe in 2016 we will have a national discussion and perhaps a national acknowledgement that forget the federal government's debt. We are surrounded by not every state and certainly not every city and county, but we are surrounded by many, many states that have driven their taxpayers off a cliff. And we'll see what happens. Again, I do believe the precipitating issue, one of them anyway, will be the bankruptcy, or whatever they may call it, of Puerto Rico.
I agree with you, by the way, across the board on your comments. Listen, one of the things, so that I'm not hypocritical, that I've got to draw back to what you'd said about Obama versus Clinton in terms of let's take it back when Clinton was president. And a lot of folks will point to him, including himself, and say, I had a balanced budget. And the way our Constitution works, I place the success of that budget and that economy on Congress, because the Congress has the purse strings, specifically the House of Representatives. So when I look at the Clinton administration, and back at the time when I was engaged in debates over with even family members and friends about how successful Clinton has been. So wait a minute, he didn't do any of that. Absolutely didn't. Newt Gingrich in the contract with America and the Gingrich Revolution, that's where that balanced budget came from. And I say that now, I don't want to be hypocritical, because that's still true. Obama didn't cause this debt. The House of Representatives did. They just did it again with the omnibus bill. So we've got to have a sit down and a candlelight chat or something, and do some real soul searching on what we expect from our governments, party or whatnot, because it's all of these things have almost been flipped upside down. The Gingrich Revolution that gave us a controlled federal budget, which promises always a solid economic foundation, has been opposite. Now the Republican-led Congress has created the double deficit that you were opining about.
Do you think the people were more informed back then?
How can that be? Maybe, but how can that be?
You know what I mean by that is because right now we elect, and if we're electing the people to do this, because we always say it's back to the people, it's not really the people in office, it's the people out of office. They're electing those people in. Do you think people were more informed back then that elected the right people in?
I don't know if they were more informed. I can tell you this: we have vastly more information sources now with the internet, with cable television, with back then I think you had CNN. I don't remember any other cable broadcast news outlets during the Gingrich Revolution. Now you've got I've got my cell phone in my hand right now, which is more powerful than anything that I had back then.
More powerful than the lunar lander.
And so when you look at it that way, people can't blame what's going on now on a lack of information. In my view, people can only blame, they got to get the mirror out and look themselves in the mirror and say, I'm the one that voted for this guy because it helped my pocket, and to heck with the rest of the world.
Well, there's another difference too, and I believe this accounts for the popularity of not only Donald Trump but also Bernie Sanders. The Democrats stand tough. They speak tough. They stand firm. President Obama, I disagree with virtually every one of his policies, but he is a bold man. He is the kind of leader that the Republicans certainly do not have, with very, very few exceptions. The Republicans have been emasculated. Back in the day when Bill Clinton was able to pass a budget that actually got the country back into good shape with the agreement of the remember, by the way, the Republicans only controlled the House. They didn't even control the Senate.
But they control the purse strings. That's how.
Well, as they do now, and they have the Senate, and they've chosen not to do it.
Right.
The difference is the Democrats have been bold. The Republicans have been emasculated. The Republicans have become the party of wimp. We have elected men who promise things, and when they do get the power, they refuse to exercise that power. And that will be a big discussion along the Republicans' side, in particular, if they lose and get blown out in this next election.
Well, Jim, hold that thought. We're going to go to a break. When we come back, let's pick up with Thomas Jefferson and his opinion on what you just said. Folks, we'll be right back.
And back to the Mike Hewitt Show, brought to you by RenegadeRiver.com. Segment 2 has begun, Mike.
Hey, listen, when I look at where we're at in situations like this, sometimes it helps me at least to get my head around it by looking back. So when we went to break, I talked about when we come back, let's see how one of my favorite founders would look at this. So I quote, "A wise and frugal government shall restrain men from injuring one another, shall leave them otherwise free to regulate their own pursuits of industry and improvement, and shall not take from the mouth of labor the bread it has earned. This is the sum of good government." And when I read that and I contrast it to the comments you've made, Jim, about where Republican leadership has went, and indeed where the Democratic Party in total has went. I think, how did we get this far away? You and I, where we differ, Jim, is that you'll point a lot to the elected leadership. And I don't do that. I look to the folks that have elected them and that would re-elect them without a problem. So someone says on Facebook, how does this relate to today to terrorists and political agenda who want to destroy us from within? I wonder. And what this person was asking is, how did we get from that comment of Jefferson to where we're at? My reply is, it's about the people. An informed and virtuous electorate would direct its government entirely differently. And I say that, and I use Ted Kennedy as an example, and I'm not trying to be shrill. This guy killed a woman. He killed a pregnant woman, and they reelected him for decades without a problem because he brought home the bacon to his state. That's all those folks cared about. He'd come out, he'd say the contrite, warm, feely, touchy quotes, and he brought home dollars from the feds to the state. And that's the end of that story. So when I look and say, how is it that local government, because the only thing Tip O'Neill ever said I agreed with is that all politics is local. So I say, okay, it's easy to blame this on Bonner, but local, to your point, local and state are spending money willy-nilly like they're from the Willy Wonka show, and they're just loose with free do-re-mi, and they're not. And for me, it comes back to the people. The people are wanting, or at least not stopping, to your point, the people are at least not stopping $15 million bicycle paths that less than 1% of the public will use. Crazy, and I mean, just to me, insane local and state government policy, along with the omnibus on a federal level. Nobody is standing up and saying, stop it. And the folks that are, because so few are made to look like they're shrill right-wing extremists, even though here just a couple weeks ago, when I read JFK's quote, anyone that didn't know who quoted that would have thought it was some right-wing Tea Party guy. It was JFK. We got that far to where we're at because the electorate wants free stuff, no more and no less. Now, everyone talks about how Trump is out in front in the polls. Maybe he's at 50%, but he's at 50% of half. So then if you look at the national, is he really going to win? I don't know. The entire Democratic Party hates him, even though he's given them millions of dollars. Half the Republican Party says they will not vote for this man no matter what. I don't know what he's going to win. What do you think? What do you guys think?
One of the things I keep hearing is people are like closet supporters.
Okay.
Oh, the Trump's bad, and then they turn and go, but I really like him.
You may be right.
Because they're afraid to actually publicly support him because you don't know the backlash based on it. And I think people are going to go in, oh yeah, vote for this guy, and they're secretly putting Trump down like it's some kind of underground conspiracy to vote him in.
I think that's a really good point.
I think he's exactly
right. The media, and let's face it, as Mike said, the media is doing its best to make Trump look like a buffoon. Half of the Republican Party and 100% of the Republican leadership is thrilled to let people think that Donald Trump is a buffoon. Certainly, Jeb Bush, the preordained winner, has said that he's a jerk. He publicly just said that just a few days ago.
Was that in response to him putting the picture of Jeb up there with his finger?
No, as a matter of fact, that's before. But the reality is that the way that you defeat someone who is killing you in other areas is you try to mock those.
You destroy them.
No, you don't. You destroy their voters. You make them embarrassed to say that they are for someone. How dare you would even think about that? As a matter of fact, walk into a group of liberals, walk into a school and have a chat with them and say, I was listening to Rush Limbaugh yesterday. See what the look on their faces, because certain groups have said if you dare even listen to or like something, you are to be shunned. So this has been an effective message to keep us from speaking. We'll see how it works out in the ballot box.
But you take that same thing even on the conservative or classical liberal side. I listened to Rush Limbaugh yesterday on your Facebook page. You'll have a lot of folks from our side of the spectrum that'll be chastising you because they've been poisoned on it. They just get on the bus with whoever's driving.
The way that you win the elections again today, we have a different kind of a media. Is that you make people embarrassed to even get the information out. And we know this, that certainly we are told by in the Republican side, we are told that if you even were to go to a Trump or even to a lesser extent a Cruz rally, that there's something wrong with you.
Right, but on the other hand, when Trump came to GR, would he have 6,000 or 7,000 people jammed in there like tuna?
It was more than that.
Exactly, and outside,
lots of folks.
They had the overrun. Listen, even me, I like Trump. I just want to say it. I like him. I like what I like is I feel we're going to get somebody who isn't what Colonel Peters called Obama on national TV. He's a legitimate guy who's going to come in and put things in place. I feel he's saying what
Are you
I
endorsing
want
him?
to know. I don't know. And that's the problem. You feel like you can't because it's Trump. Everything you want to because he's on The Apprentice.
Folks, I wish you could have saw the sheepish grin slide on his face. Like, I don't want to say that. People are listening.
You know what? Fine. I'll endorse Trump. I like Trump. I'll vote for Trump in the primary. And it's not because I don't like Cruz or I don't like some of the other people out there. I just get a different feeling with him. He's somebody that I feel at this point in time, we're in 1980 again. With a Carter leaving, we need somebody who's going to come in and walk out of a meeting against Gorbachev. We need a guy who's going to walk, just tear down this wall-type guy.
You want another guy, don't pound on the table. It's just echoing across the entire state of Michigan.
I'm fired up over him.
Jeepers.
I love it. Enthusiasm. That's what we lack in the Republican Party. You bet.
Listen, during the year 2015, one of the highlights for me was when Obama was announcing the deal that he'd made with Cuba, and now we're buddies, us in Cuba. And while that was happening, Castro is imprisoning people that are political opposition. And you go, wait a minute. We must be and I'm not against, by the way, opening relations with Cuba. I'm not entirely opposed to it, but it seems like the Obama would have negotiated for something. Like, let's make friends again, but in condition is stop with the political oppression. Some kind of condition. So somehow when you watch that whole episode in the early 2015, it appeared to me that Castro had the upper hand in the negotiations. And I went, wait a minute, who's going to benefit greater economically and politically on domestic and on the world stage, Castro or Obama?
Obama. In that case.
You think so?
Absolutely. Obama could care less. See, you're looking at it like, what's the right thing to do? President Obama was not.
For the people of Cuba.
Yeah, and President Obama was not. He was interested in what will my supporters think is a good idea. And the key was opening up travel and other things to Cuba. Now, as proof of what I just said, we saw the mayor.
Cuba.
Who cares? He doesn't care about Cuba. He cares about his supporters in the United States.
So that's just his little envelope.
As proof of that, we just had the mayor of the third largest city in the United States involved in an absolutely critical issue with the murders of police murdering citizens in the city. Where was the mayor of the third largest city in the United States when he had to come back to go face the issue? He was in Cuba on vacation. You don't apparently listen to NPR or talk to liberals too often. I do. That is the number one spot for people on the left to travel today. Let me tell you, that whole negotiation with Cuba happened exactly the way President Obama wanted it, to the nth degree.
So what we need to do is we need to suspend morality and say, listen, I've got some very wealthy friends that would like to go on vacation and smoke the cigars, so we don't care that they're taking honest, patriotic Cubans and throwing them in jail and beating them to death. That's okay as long as we can go to the Hotel Grand and have a Cuban cigar.
Do you hear any of the Republican leadership articulating what you just said?
I don't know. Some folks.
Hear anybody anywhere articulating what you just said?
I have to tell you,
no.
It's a shame.
Except for you.
Let me tell you.
And I agree with you, by the way.
It's a shame that the American people, the virtuous and informed American electorate, right? That's what they are, right? They're virtuous and informed. That's what our founders said it would take to sustain this republic. It's a shame that the virtuous and informed electorate of the United States of America aren't saying, craziness, stop that. We are not allowing that anymore. And they don't. They hear $20 trillion is a debt, and that doesn't go to national or to state and local governments.
Nor does it cover Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid,
and
VA.
dollar. We did this on the show a while back. Dollar end to end would now go to and around Saturn, back to Earth, and halfway back to Saturn again. That's just our federal debt. And people think these things make sense, and they don't. I don't care about party. I want somebody to embrace morality and just buy a frickin' calculator so that they can do the math.
Well,
this is simple stuff.
They got to stand tall on the issues. And unfortunately, given the short memory of the electorate, you can't stand tall on every single issue. You said earlier that Tip O'Neill had mentioned very correctly that all politics is local.
Yep.
And really, with the kind of interesting to me is that we have this concern, and I think it's legitimate, but we have this concern of ISIS and perhaps people killing people here in our country after the multiple attacks that we have suffered prior to 9/11 in our country, and of course 9/11 and since 9/11, and the outspoken clarity that the enemies of the United States have said multiple times on video is that death to America. Matter of fact, the same moment that John Kerry was in Iran signing the America, and of course in a totalitarian state, you're not allowed to say what you want. They were told by the government that this is exactly the message we want to send. And then we saw the response from American Republicans, Democrats, President, all the rest of them to that. Do we have a little crickets? There was no response whatsoever.
Speaking of saying what you want in a free society, did either one of you watch Trey Gowdy's endorsement of Marco Rubio?
A sad
It
event.
looked like they put a stick in his back to keep him up straight, and they rolled him out on the stage and said, you want to do this really bad because we're going to snatch the air out of your lungs if you don't. He looked like he was there on marching orders. Do you two agree with that assessment?
I haven't seen it. I'm going to have to see this because after hearing about this, I'm actually pretty disgusted with Trey Gowdy.
Now, Trey Gowdy is a congressman from North Carolina, some place in the southeast, and he appeared to be an upstanding Republican congressman. He was, among other things, the man in charge of the interrogation, the 11-hour interrogation of Hillary Clinton that, by most people's view, and I would include myself there, Hillary Clinton just hit it out of the park. Trey apparently must have gone on a bender the night before and didn't do any preparation. But Trey Gowdy is a guy who, matter of fact, even Donald Trump suggested might be a good attorney general, and he might very well be. Right. But he, again, like so many Republicans before him, appears somehow to magically have had his spine removed.
Must have hurt. Listen,
and it appeared to hurt if you saw that video.
We're almost out of time on this segment. There's a couple more things I want to add just before we turn into pumpkins and go on to the Enigma report. The first is I can't forget this because I was a big and remain a big Scott Walker supporter.
I was too.
His candidacy crashed and burned so early on. Listen, I watched him. I was in Wisconsin during a recall, which is why I really came to respect him. He stuck to message under tremendous heat in Wisconsin. He didn't capitulate. He didn't cave like we're talking about some of these other folks did. I walked away from that, having watched it up close firsthand, really a big supporter. And I was stunned to watch that he just never was able to get his heart.
I think he was the Rick Perry of this election.
He may have been. Well, Rick Perry was the Rick Perry of this election also. The other thing I want to talk about real briefly before we go to a break and come back to the Enigma is when I look back at 2015, I'm going to consider it the year of bullets over reason. And what I mean to say by that is we've spent the entire year with half of the right side and the entire left yelling about the shootings in America, and none of them being willing to slow down and ask why these things are happening. Because until we embrace the reasons why they're happening, not the what, not how, those things are so secondary to why they're happening. We'll never resolve it until we have as a society, an honest, long look in the mirror and saying, what in the heck are we doing wrong that folks think that this is the way to either commit suicide or to get some public notoriety? The wheels have fallen off of our societal cart, in my view, when it comes to family foundation. And I think that in our psychiatric industry, which is off in the ditch right now, I think those are the two fundamental core problems that we've got to get our hand around. Now, having said that, there has always been mass violence throughout history. Going back to Mesopotamian, there's always been mass violence, and there always will be, but we can control it and reduce it, not by controlling everyone else's freedom. So less than 1% do something evil, and we stop 99%'s freedom. Those things are silly to me. So bullets over reason is what I'm calling 2015.
There was two big issues this year that kind of got me when we were talking about this issue. One was the Bill Cosby whole thing coming out. That was a pretty big story. And two, the whole Confederate flag controversy. Just those two things were kind of flooring type issues this year.
I've never been the guy that waved the Confederate flag, but to me it was a squelching of First Amendment rights of those folks, and then secondarily, to erase our history is an extremely dangerous thing to do. Now, before we clip, Brian, before we go to break, let me end up with my three final predictions. The first prediction, I believe Trump is going to win and be the next president. Now, I might be wrong, but I believe that's the case. Secondly, I think that 2016 will see Obama absolutely engulfed in a sex scandal.
Obama?
Yep.
Oh, my God.
I believe that. You watch and see. And then lastly, I think Hillary will be charged and Obama will pardon her. Those are my three predictions for 2016.
Whoa. Do you think she's charged post-election?
Yes.
So after she loses, then they charge her, then he pardons her?
Yep. I believe that. No,
That's interesting.
That's what I see. So that's it. And now listen, people think, oh, Mike, stop that. He's not going to be a... You watch this guy when he's out like the famous scene where he's sitting 5 foot from Michelle Obama and she's obviously infuriated. And who was that he was with? Denmark or somewhere, the prime minister's wife over there. I can't remember who. They were obviously flirting and laughing. And I maybe I'm wrong. We'll revisit this prediction in a year, but that's my predictions: Trump victory, Obama sex scandal, and Hillary will be pardoned. So with that, we got to go to a break, and we're going to come back with the Enigma Report.
And we're back to the Mike Hewitt Show, brought to you by RenegadeRiver.com. And it's back for one more time this year. The Enigma Report.
I gotta tell you, I've been really looking forward to this one a little bit because I'm conflicted. That's probably the best word to describe this enigma, and it is an enigma to me. Recently, Jim Riley, you posted on your Facebook page an article. In fact, I think it was on the Muskegon Pundit, your blog. Saudi billionaire buys Yale a new Sharia law center.
Yes.
And so you posted that to your Facebook page, and a day-long, very respectful debate engaged amongst some friends on Facebook page. But they're I don't want to get into them as much as I do the concept that this guy, the Saudi prince, spends $10 million on erecting a Sharia law center.
And let me just clarify. It is not a study of Islam, which I think is legitimate.
It is. Yep.
This is a center to study and very clearly promote Sharia law, which is an entirely different issue. It is a standalone, separate legal system that is anathema to everything that happens in the United States and the Western world.
It is just such a contrast that the two systems are not, they cannot co-commingle.
You mean ours and Sharia?
And Sharia law and constitutional law.
First Amendment.
They all of it, equal rights. You know, if your wife has an affair, you get a divorce. There, they take her out in the parking lot and stone her.
That's right. And that is Sharia law.
That is
very clearly.
It's part of the law. And your wife, by the way, if you don't want her to leave the home, she doesn't leave the home. She doesn't drive. She can't get educated. And you read these things and you go, really? This is what in America we've got folks that think, well, that's just an alternative. It's another choice, Mike. Calm down. And the folks that were pushing back were saying there's nothing wrong with learning. And listen, I agree with that. That's when I say I'm conflicted. I think that they're partly right to say we need to know our opposition. On the other hand, this isn't, to your point, this isn't an academic to me. This is politics. I recognize politics. I'm immersed in it. And when I read this article, this is solely he's making a $10 million investment to the hierarchy of our educational centers, looking for a cultural shift in America. And I refuse. I'm not surrendering. What say you, Jim? You are very familiar with the article.
Well, I think it's important to understand that this is nothing new. The Saudis and Wahhabi Islam is the most virulent form of Islam. That started in Saudi Arabia. It continues to be funded by the Saudis, the billionaire Saudis. And what they have done, and their stated goal, they don't hide this. They said, much like the communists who said that we will bury you, we will have worldwide communism, the Islamics do believe not just in a caliphate in Europe and parts of Asia. They do believe in worldwide Islamic control. They believe it to their core. And those who are billionaires are taking their money and allowing it to speak. They are very bold. And they are going to universities in the United States, the most recent one being Yale University. And it's important the Yale connection is important because it is one of the most highly regarded universities in the country. As a matter of fact, most of our presidents over the last 10 presidents have attended Yale in one form or another, including Hillary Clinton.
Isn't that the school that just recently voted 40+% they'd be in favor of getting rid of the First Amendment?
They signed the petition, and it was a great idea. About time they got rid of it.
Well, again,
listen, that works hand in hand with what the Saudi prince is investing in.
Well, and that's the key here. The key here is not, as you suggested, that they're studying Sharia law, which very importantly must be studied. This is a standalone center under the guise of academic research that, in fact, will be used to promote the benefits of Sharia law and to extol the benefits and Sharia law within the country. And make no mistake about it, there have been votes, and there are places within Canada, there have been active movements within our country to say we want, instead of this little enclave in Chicago, for instance, we want Sharia law to be the law of the land. There are people who are moving very well organized, well funded to make Sharia law, the only law, the most powerful law in certain parts of the country, our country, as a first step. You do not lose the war in a giant tsunami. You lose the war in tiny, tiny increases in the water as it rises.
Listen, and the example or the proof of that exact statement is when you look at our own political landscape. In fact, we talked about it early on today, and certainly on other episodes. JFK, when I mentioned earlier today, when you read the words that he said, if you didn't know who said them, you would think that some far-right Tea Party person said
exactly
them. And you would be demonized, which is what we were talking about earlier with Trump supporters. They're not made to look stupid. They're demonized. You're evil and you're a racist if you support him.
If you even listen to him.
If you even, what are you thinking to do that? And so when I look at those things and I compare JFK to the comments he made, and I think, holy mackerel, we've come a long ways in such an extremely brief period of time. And that's, I think, the point you're making with Sharia law. It's not a big tidal wave. It's drip, drip, drip. It's never ending. It's constant. It's across the media spectrum. That's how they move culture.
Very interestingly and very successful. Are we going to allow this? Certainly, we shouldn't make it illegal, but we do not have on universities white male studies. We do not have on university men's studies, and we don't because there would be a public outcry against it. It's not illegal. You could do it. But on university campuses, we have black studies, we have Islamic studies, we have Asian studies, we have women's studies. These are full-blown academic courses and degree programs. Because they've been pushed by folks with an agenda.
What was the term you just used the outcry, public outcry? Is that what you said?
Yes.
I have to tell you something. One of the things I've learned in 2015 is I no longer believe in the concept of a public outcry. I believe in the concept of a media outcry, and the public is either disinterested or has convinced itself that stuff will never happen in America, or they're busy watching whatever they're watching on the History Channel reality TV. There
was a public outcry for Jenner.
I don't. Well,
that was it. Like that's the kind of where we're at today.
Bruce,
I don't think
Bruce
that was a.
and Caitlyn Jenner.
Listen,
That's crazy.
I don't even think that was a public outcry. I reject it.
No,
Let me tell you
I
why.
agree with you.
To say 1 or 2 or 3% or 10% of the public commented on Facebook about Bruce Jenner or whatever his name is now, I don't think that's a public outcry. To say I entered into a blog exchange 3 weeks ago about that is not a public outcry. The media generates and creates public outcry. To me, that's an enigma. But what the enigma is where in the heck is the electorate on these topics?
I can just to throw some 2 cents on the Sharia law school. I'm disgusted as an American, a constitutionalist, a conservative, a dad, a business owner, every way possible. Any hat I wear in life, I'm disgusted by this. We have the First Amendment to prevent the separation of church and state, which means that we don't have a court based on religion. We have a court based on a set of laws. This is a religion-based law system, which is exactly why people came to America to prevent this from happening. The Protestants left, or the Christians left because of the Protestant church in England. We're going back to this because of the misinformation. And you said earlier today, we have so much information at the palm of our hand.
It's almost too much.
It's too much. Exactly. It's too much. Yeah. It's all to get us distracted. Everybody in today's world, ADD, everybody would be on ADD medication 20 years ago if they took us back then, because there's so much stuff. Ooh, butterfly. Ooh, butterfly. Ooh, butterfly. There's so much to distract us from this.
Jim,
Most people don't even know this is happening.
They don't. But Jim, I think you and I were called intolerant, weren't we? Wasn't that the general suggestion?
Well, that's the way that you win the argument. But you don't address their argument. So you call them a bigot, a racist, a woman hater.
And the idea behind that is to not have a meeting in the arena of ideas, but to shut the dialogue down.
Well, it works against wimps, and it's worked very successfully against almost every single Republican candidate out there.
Hasn't worked real well against us. Here we are talking about it constantly.
We're not getting elected, and that's what this election on the Republican side is going to be about. This election, it's going to be about wimp or somebody standing tall.
I think people want that standing tall person. I really do.
Listen, next week, you're going to be gone, right, Jim? You're gone with Honey Bunch skiing?
I'm gone, baby.
Next week on the show, we're going to have 2 guests. I'm going to at least let you know about the first one, so you'll look forward to it. We're going to have Pete Hoekstra back on next Wednesday at 9 a.m. Pete and I have got a whole bunch of topics. You going to join us, Matt?
Yeah, I'm definitely going to be here, and I'm excited to hear Pete.
We'll have Ludwig von Wiedendorski sitting in for Jim Riley. I don't know what kind of trade that was. We'll have to see how. What do you think, Jim? Was that a bad trade?
I think that's a great move.
There you go. But we're going to have Pete on. We're going to have someone else on that helps us with understanding the Syrian immigration thing, which is coming back to life. I know the media's been rather silent on it, but that's picking up some steam again. So it isn't like it went away for the holidays. It's been moving right on. And in the meantime, find us on Twitter at Talk Mike Hewitt, and on Facebook at /The Mike Hewitt Show, and of course, MikeHewitt.com. Thank you, folks, and hey, please have a very, very safe and happy New Year. If you get a little bit liquored up, don't drive. I got grandbabies out there. Thank you very much, and I'll talk to you next Wednesday.